Welcome to this episode of It's Not You, but Sometimes It Is, where I get to have real talk about the real crap that C-suite executives face along their journey. And my conversation today with Sabrina Bailey, so awesome. Sabrina really takes us deeply through her process of growth and gives us all her secrets and strategies to becoming highly, highly successful. She's been a executive in financial services for over 20 years. Really fast pace growth up the ladder into the executive role. And she basically lays out all of her lessons learned and secrets to rising that corporate ladder very quickly. So I know you're going to love this episode. Welcome aboard. Welcome to this episode of It's Not You, but Sometimes It Is, the podcast where I talk with badass C-suite leaders about the crazy situations that they've encountered and when it's never their fault, when it's sometimes their fault, and all the wisdom they have gained from it. And today is no exception. I am so pleased to have Sabrina Bailey here with me. She is the CEO of Fiducian Advisors in the Chicago, Illinois area. And Sabrina has over 20 years of executive leadership in finance services. So, Sabrina, thank you so much for being here today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
So, give us a little bit of kind of the arc of your career. What landed you in the CEO role? Is that something you always thought you would do from the time you were a little girl with pigtails?
No. So the arc of my career, you can envision a winding path. I never set out to become a CEO. My career was intentionally nonlinear because about a decade into my career, I realized the importance of focusing on impact over income is the best way to describe it. And so I chose roles that aligned with purpose over predictability and embracing that winding path that leads to meaningful change. So each move in my career, it's all been within financial services, but was guided by really the desire to learn and lead and contribute to something greater than myself. So the path to the C-suite allowed me to take different roles. Some of those roles were, I would call them roles that were lateral moves. Some of the roles I took, I actually moved backwards slightly to leapfrog forwards.
Mhm.
And then I've been in many different sectors of the financial services industry, from investment advisory to asset management to fintech to data and analytics. At every crossroad, my question that led me to the C-suite was, does this align with my purpose? And if it aligned with my purpose, which is helping people have access to strong financial advice, I would follow up with three additional questions. Does it expand my knowledge?
Mhm.
Does it increase my network? And does it fuel my passion of leading through times of inflection? And I would only pursue opportunities that I could say yes to all four of those areas because that is what I love to do. And so, as part of that, ultimately led to becoming a CEO at Fiducian Advisors, which has been an amazing experience.
So, how in the world did you come up with that criteria when you were a young professional? Did you have some sort of a Buddha enlightened career coach? Who thinks of that stuff?
No, I came to a crossroads in my career where I was really contemplating what I want to do next. And actually, I was working for a leader who was not a great leader. I have two daughters who are now in their 20s. And at the time, my youngest daughter asked me a question, which was this: Mom, if your leader's a bully, why would you continue to work for a bully? Is there something else you should be doing? And I was like, that's a great question. But then the question was, what do I want to do? And how do I find it? And I'm a very process-driven person, and I realized that I wanted criteria because there are so many opportunities. And I wanted that criteria to align with my passion and purpose first and foremost, because I don't consider work work. It's just part of my life rhythm. And work can only be part of your life rhythm if you truly love what you
Mhm.
do every day and wake up living and breathing it.
Yeah. So you were purpose driven, but it sounds like you had to have a little kid, remind you that it's not just about the why, but also the how, and that there's
Oh, yes.
principles to the way that you want things to go and work and be, and how work should be. And you were in an environment that was not aligning with how things should be.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes children are our best reminder of what we forget as we become adults.
Yeah. And you taught her values and she reflected those back to you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, leadership is a lot like being a parent. And I think as soon as I started really understanding parenting and how to develop a little human and let them flourish and become the best version of themselves, that's when I became a better leader, right? When I understood
Agreed.
it's not just about getting stuff done and helping them get stuff done. It's really about their growth. And I think a lot of leaders miss that mark, right?
Yeah.
So, talk about really difficult situations that you have had. And, you've been in a male-dominated world,
Yeah.
and you rose very quickly and took on roles that you weren't totally ready for.
Yes.
And so, talk about some of the difficulty that you faced and how you had to grow and develop yourself and the people around you.
I think the biggest difficulty I faced, and it actually started early in my career because I didn't grow up in a space where I had the network. I didn't go to an Ivy League college where the network could be built. And within the first year of my career, I had a gentleman who was well-meaning but off base tell me that I didn't have the pedigree or the network to be successful, so I should give up now. And as a 20-year-old, that's really hard to hear when you're trying to think about what's my next career. I was very happy doing what I was doing. That didn't end as my career progressed. So I had an experience at one point where I was working in an office for one of the organizations, and it was an all male team. That doesn't necessarily matter, but they did tell me I had to stay behind from a team lunch because clients prefer to hear a woman's voice on the phone. And it was that when I was already in a senior position in my career. Another time I had a client terminate me solely because I was a female, and they felt that I should be at home with my girls and taking care of them and not in the workforce.
Mm.
As I've gone through those experiences, though, I've learned there are two ways people respond to them. And I've got so many stories we could talk for hours about this. You can either be bitter and frustrated and angry about those experiences, or you can choose to take a step back and say, there may be a little bit of truth in something they're saying, or maybe something came across wrong, or just they're misguided,
Mhm.
and really choose to have a positive attitude going through that. So I always say I have my 5 minute to 48-hour rule. Things that really frustrate me, I give myself 5 minutes or 48 hours to get over, depending on how severe it is. Um, and it was a really good guideline because if it's small, you can just choose your attitude and move forward. If it's bigger, you have to give yourself the time to go through the anger, all the things you want to say that you shouldn't say and would never say and can't say until your time frame is up to avoid saying things through emotion. And I've just found resetting with that positive attitude
Mhm.
has allowed me to show others what it looks like to lead with joy because you can only find joy in the midst of that positivity. And look, it's not always easy. I haven't gotten it perfect. I have failed many, many times, but I've learned from each of those failures. So that was the hardest piece to navigate through my career. I would say it also taught me, though, as a leader, I wanted to lead people first. To your point earlier, and leading people first is not as common as I would hope it is in our industry still today. And so that was the next challenge was as I became very senior in global leadership roles, CEO roles, there's always questions or concerns about can you truly lead people first and generate the growth results you're looking for?
Mhm.
And quite frankly, there is a balance there. I've been at times in my career too people focused where we lost sight of what we needed to achieve as a company. That doesn't end up good for people because there's no opportunity for growth
Yep.
or challenges. And on the flip side, if you focus too much on revenue, you lose sight of people and driving that belief and confidence and clarity for people that they need to excel.
Mhm.
And so I've learned over time to just say that people first organization is who I am and it's critical. And then communicating what I mean by people first. So, what I mean by people first is setting clear goals and stretching individuals well beyond their comfort zone so that growth can happen. I mean, believing in people when they can't see they should have belief in themselves, because when you believe in someone, you unlock a potential that's hard to even describe as they start to believe they can accomplish more.
Mhm.
And then it's about leading people with radical clarity.
Mhm.
And that radical clarity doesn't mean there's not accountability or consequences. It is just creating the clarity required so that they can truly achieve their goals with excellence.
Yeah, yeah, that's incredibly articulately spoken, Sabrina. I wish I could have had that insight younger in my leadership. And when we hit those moments of adversity where like those guys were knocking you down and back, and they didn't realize that they're actually making you stronger and making you into a better leader. You were becoming more resilient, but you were also realizing what effective leadership looked like so that you could lift up
Yes.
others. And a good leader doesn't create followers, they create other leaders, right?
Agreed.
They create people that are going to be strong and smart and deliver exceptional value.
Yes. Yes. And leaning in and it also helped me recognize, yes, some of it was because I was female. But when we look at the people who are often overlooked in organizations, it is not gender specific, race specific, personality perspective. It ranges the entire gamut
Hmm.
of people who don't fit into a specific mold.
Hmm.
And being able to see the unseen is one of my favorite parts of the role because when you see someone, you can just see them light up
Yeah.
as they move forward in that growth trajectory in their career.
Yeah, yeah, that little nugget of brilliance that everyone has. I'm always looking for that.
Yes, yes.
So this is all sparkly and positive and wonderful. Let's get into the prickly negative stuff because that's where I've certainly learned a lot of the funnest lessons, at least.
Yes.
So, I know in your industry, there is sometimes some toxic, crazy stuff that happens in any industry, right? But like some cultural, like just like you learned how to be a good leader from not great leadership,
Yeah.
what have you seen as far as cultural issues in a team or a company that's really held back people from being able to be their best? And how did you deal with it? How did you overcome it?
Yeah, the from a cultural perspective, I'd simplify it into bad bosses are the ones who lead through fear and ambiguity.
Hmm.
And they create a fear-based leadership and culture that actually kills truth telling. Not because people aren't telling the truth, they just stop saying anything. So you've got a huge gap between what's actually going on in an organization and what you hear about. And it also slows decision making.
Hmm.
The challenge in those cultures is they can be highly successful from a growth perspective for 2 years or 15 years. And you don't know exactly what that runway looks like. But from a cultural perspective, as soon as you have people who don't feel safe and they stop sharing their ideas or taking risks, it stifles innovation, it stifles collaboration, and eventually it erodes long-term growth opportunities.
Hmm.
Either because your really strong people ask themselves, if I'm not here, then where can I be successful?
Hmm.
And they'll go find that next place to be successful. Or because people will just show up and do their job, but they're not giving any more than that to the organization or advancing the cause. And so it's really the surface level alignment that you see. People will follow those leaders for sure. Most of the time, though, it's out of fear for their own livelihood,
Yeah.
not because they're excited to follow those leaders. And so that's the worst culture I see is those that are based in that fear and then ambiguity.
Hmm. And then those leaders come to me and go, "Why don't my people care?" It's like they're not even accountable and they don't really care about their work, right? They're disengaged. I'm like, yeah, they're disengaged because they just can't care anymore because they've been afraid, they haven't been heard, they haven't been validated, It's a
Yeah,
psychologically unsafe environment. And so eventually they have to just throw their hands up.
they do. And I will say on the opposite of that, the best team example that I have of working for a team culture that's working is that I live in the wonder phase oftentimes, which means I am thinking about all the next big, great things we could do as a team. And I share that with my team when I join because I do need a team who will hold me accountable to, we already have these 5 things we're executing on. We have to execute. So let's stop with your wonder for a moment and get in a room and all agree what those priorities are. And then if we hear you say something 3 times, we'll bring it back. But if you just say it once, we're going to ignore it for now and keep
Hmm.
moving. And the best example of that is I had a team a few years ago that literally called me into a team meeting to tell me there's too much on the board right now. We love your ideas. It was all mapped out on the whiteboard, and they said, help us prioritize. Let's agree on it, and then we'll run as a team to help the organization. That is a healthy culture. But you
Absolutely.
have to have a leader who's willing to recognize that is one of my weaknesses.
Hmm.
I throw a lot of ideas out. And because of my role, some people think they need to execute on them, but I'm really just ideating.
Yeah.
Having that team who understands that and can pull you back in with that trust, knowing you're not going to get offended. It's an exciting opportunity to actually take a step back and strategize on, okay, execution, what do we need to do and how do we sequence it? That's a healthy culture.
Sabrina, we must be wired really similarly because I had one of my team members said, Meg, I need to just constantly ask you, is that just an idea or a directive? And he would
Yes.
just like reality check with me. I was like, no, it's just an idea. I'm just having fun thinking about what we could do. And he's like, okay. Because he would get all stressed thinking that I was telling him he had to do something. I'm like, no,
Yes.
let go of the stress and just have fun thinking about the possibility with me. And he was like, okay, I can have fun now. Now that I know you're not
Yes.
telling me to do it. Yeah.
Yes. It's
So it
true.
sounds like you've been very self-reflective in your career.
Yes.
Right. So, give us an example of one of those kind of key learning moments for you in your career where you realized you had a big growth opportunity, where you were getting in your own way, you had some sort of a mindset approach or a skill gap or a trait that you needed to manage better or overcome. What was that? And what did you carry forward from that?
Yeah, I've had so many great mentors in my career who've been honest with me. So at first, after I had mentioned I got the feedback that I wasn't meant to make it in this industry, I would say I initially in my youth responded with an intensity that was too much in terms of fighting my way forward. So I became more aggressive than I needed to be. I was focused on my personal advancement rather than the collective impact. And a great mentor pulled me aside and gave me the hard truth that the aggressiveness was coming off as arrogance and that he didn't believe that was my intent, but it was the impact I was leaving at the table. And if I continue to have that impact, I wouldn't reach my full potential. And so I realized I needed to shift how I was showing up. Unfortunately, then I overcorrected the opposite direction, as we all do at times.
Yeah.
Took that feedback to a whole new level and just became quiet at the table, prioritizing serving others, giving others credit for the work that was being done at the expense, arguably, of both our people's growth as well as our clients.
Mm.
And so another mentor pulled me aside and said, okay, well, now you don't have executive presence at the table, which, by the way, I'm not a fan of the term executive presence because what does that exactly mean? When I asked, he just said I was too quiet. So people didn't recognize the contributions I was bringing because I wasn't voicing them at the table. And there is a way to do that in an authentic way that's true to myself. And at that point, I just learned to show up as my authentic self. I'm a unique mix of passion and directness
Mhm.
with strong opinions, but grounded in data and intellectual curiosity. So I'm always willing to shift my perspective with new data, new information, and new learning.
Mhm.
In some cases, that can be seen as wishy-washy, but ultimately, it's just helping people recognize all strategies a hypothesis And if we don't test and learn, that strategy will not be successful over the long term. So I really learned to balance conviction with openness. And I would say the third thing that I learned is not all feedback is good feedback.
Yeah.
So I had another great mentor who pulled me aside a few years later and said, think about feedback as a piece of steak. And you take a bite and there's a little bit of gristle there. What do? You eat the good part, but get rid of the gristle.
Hmm.
You need to think about feedback in that way. So I would say feedback now I consider one of my superpowers. I do love receiving feedback. I do not get defensive about feedback. I don't think every feedback is worthy of necessarily addressing. So, for example, within the last few years, somebody gave me feedback that as a female CEO, I needed to show up wearing dresses and high heels every day to look the part.
Hmm.
Here's the thing. I don't believe that feedback. I didn't execute on the feedback. But where the superpower comes in is if you actually take a step back, there's something behind that feedback. So there was a point in time when I showed up in a way that that individual didn't feel like I was showing up with that executive level
Hmm.
confidence or look. And so I really had to go back and dig down further with that individual to say, at what point did I show up where you were not happy with how I looked, or was there a client in the room? What is behind that so that you can adjust
Yeah.
to the feedback?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
those are my biggest
Brilliant.
lessons.
Brilliant. Brilliant. If only we could have all learned those lessons real quick, right at the beginning of our
Oh my gosh.
career, right?
Yes.
So, you've obviously done a lot of personal growth, and work is for me a playground for personal growth and my own kind of emotional maturation and figuring out who I am, what I'm meant to do in the world. So, what is this next chapter of growth for you? A lot of people would say you have hit the pinnacle of your career, right? So, what are you going to be focused on to know that you want to be ultimately fulfilled by your career, have the influence you want on the world?
Yeah, as I was thinking about this question, I would say the next phase of growth for me is multifaceted, but deeply intentional.
Okay.
When I think about the next phase of growth and my goal of prioritizing impact over income, I think through areas where I can still continue to grow. And I truly believe nobody ever reaches a pinnacle where they don't grow, because if you're not growing, you're dying in some way, shape, or form. For me, that looks like spending a lot more time on strategic planning and sequencing with execution. Again, living in that ideation phase, being much more clear with people what is just an idea versus what is a directive, to your point. So, continued growth in that area. The second is becoming ruthless about energy management
Mm,
by saying no to obligations that don't bring me joy
hmm.
or align with my purpose. And I am not good at that. So I can get energy depleted by saying yes to too much. And I really want to focus on where do I actually say no going forward
Good.
so that I can focus on the areas that give me the energy to continue to move forward. And the third thing is just continuing to expand my teaching and mentorship network. I absolutely love pouring what I've learned back into people because I had mentors who were candid and clear with me that allowed me to take that feedback and get to where I am. I want to continue to do that. So it's spending more time in that area, sharing my playbooks with others, helping them determine what their mission is, what they're really passionate about. How do they show up every day with love for what they do, where they consider it part of their life rhythm rather than work? So that's the third piece of it, is shifting that time by saying no so that I can spend the more time mentoring and giving back to the next generation.
That sounds pretty brilliant and on point. I know you're going to be able to do that. That's
Thank
pretty
you.
cool. So, um, last question for you, Sabrina. If I can give you a time machine and send you back 15 or so years, what is the advice you would give yourself?
I would give myself three pieces of advice. One, invest in mentors early without being defensive when they provide feedback. Um,
Nice.
because that would have allowed me to grow faster in terms of my personal growth if I would have removed some of that defensiveness and sought those mentors out earlier on. The second would have been to guard my calendar like a CFO guards financials and really steward my calendar because time is the scarcest of all capitals. It doesn't matter what we do, we cannot get more of it. And time doesn't necessarily equal impact. So it would be aligning my calendar with the impact I wanted to have in a more ruthless way. And then the third, especially early in my career, would be to remember prosperity is a team sport, not an individual sport. And that by caring for people and choosing to focus on helping people grow and helping clients prosper, it eliminates the noise and creates a more sustainable organization.
Nice. So many of your answers came in three.
Me too. I like the number three.
Well, I love it because it's easy for our listeners to remember all of your brilliant little nuggets here, Sabrina. This is obviously a hard-won wisdom that you've shared with us and presented very articulately. And I know that that came from, a lot of self-reflection and feedback that does not feel good in the moment. And I also just want to share, like, even though we're at a later part in our careers and can say we love feedback, there's always going to be an initial reaction, right? Like
Always.
if you have an ego, you're going to have a reaction to feedback, but it is the most important resource for your own growth and success by far.
Yes.
So I love
By
that you
far.
kept coming back to that.
Thank you.
So thank you again for being here and sharing all this with us. This was a lot of fun, Sabrina. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was a great sharing.